Imagine this, a war that's dragged on for a decade, 10 grueling years, and it's locked in this brutal, just unbreakable stalemate.
Yeah.
You've got these city walls, towering, legendary. They seem completely impenetrable, like a defiant challenge. And then outside, there's this army, just exhausted. Their morale is bleeding away with every single season.
Right.
So when brute force has totally failed, when hope is, dwindling to almost nothing, what revolutionary strategy could possibly work? What do you even do when everything you've tried just hasn't cut it?
It's that ultimate deadlock moment, isn't it, where the conventional approach has just completely hit its limit.
Exactly.
The sheer scale of a war going on that long, the exhaustion it would breed on both sides, really, it creates this kind of desperate vacuum.
Yeah.
Only the most audacious, the most unexpected move could possibly break through that.
Absolutely. And that's precisely where we're plunging in for this deep dive. Our mission today really is to explore the legend of the Trojan Horse. We're framing it as the ultimate act of strategic deception.
We're going to try and uncover the chilling desperation that drove this audacious plan, the cunning minds behind putting it together, and the truly shocking, almost unbelievable events that let a simple wooden beast breach the mightiest city walls.
It's a story that, well, it forces us to ask some pretty profound questions, doesn't it? Like, how could such a seemingly straightforward deception bring down an entire empire?
Right.
And what profound, timeless lessons does this agonizing tale teach us about, say, trust, vigilance, and the true, sometimes terrifying power of strategic cunning?
And maybe the biggest question of all, why does this story still resonate? Why are we still talking about it centuries later, still kind of held in its thrall? Let's unpack this.
Okay.
So our story, like we said, is set in the 10th year. The 10th grueling year of the Trojan War. For a full decade, the mighty Greek forces, the Achaeans, as Homer calls them, had laid siege to this magnificent city, Troy. Now, these weren't just any city walls. In the myths, they were famously said to have been built by gods themselves, Poseidon and Apollo. Yeah, that's the legend. That's how impregnable they seemed.
And it's certainly proven it over 10 years.
They absolutely had. I mean, these walls had withstood countless Greek assaults. They held firm against every conventional attack you could think of.
Wow.
The Greeks were utterly exhausted by this point. Their morale was waning significantly. The sources tell us countless heroes had already fallen. Even the great Achilles had, withdrawn for a time.
Right.
They were just stuck in this almost unbreakable stalemate. A war of attrition they simply couldn't win by force.
And on the other side, you've got the Trojans. Initially led by the formidable Hector, before his fall, they remained defiant.
Protected by Apollo, too, according to the myths.
So their city stood firm. It really created this total impasse, both sides utterly weary. But Troy's defenses, its proud citizens, its champions, it just seemed like they were destined to outlast the invaders.
Yeah, traditional warfare had failed. Spectacularly failed.
So this is where the narrative shifts, doesn't it? Away from sheer might towards pure intellect.
Exactly. A new, desperate strategy was needed. Something that completely transcended brute force.
Right.
And it was in this moment of, well, utter desperation that Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, stepped forward.
Odysseus.
Yeah, unlike the more, brawny warriors like Ajax or the furious Achilles, Odysseus was renowned for his extraordinary intellect, his silver tongue, his strategic genius.
He was a master of tricks, wasn't he? Illusions, the unexpected.
Totally. He was the one who could see past the immediate battlefield and kind of into the minds of his enemies. He got it. Troy couldn't be taken by force, only by deceit.
So if brute force was completely off the table, what did Odysseus actually propose? What was this wild, audacious idea that finally got the other Greek leaders to even listen?
Well, his proposal was, audacious is the right word, almost insane, really, to construct a colossal, hollow wooden horse.
A giant horse.
A giant horse, presented as an offering to the gods, right? But its true purpose was to serve as a Trojan horse, a vessel to hide elite Greek warriors inside its belly. Letting them sneak into the city, the sheer audacity of it was just breathtaking.
The risk involved here, I mean, you can't overstate it.
No way.
The entire plan relies completely on the Trojans being gullible enough, right? And the sheer nerve of the deception itself.
Absolutely. And despite, initial skepticism from the other Greek leaders, you can imagine Agamemnon maybe raising an eyebrow.
Yeah.
They reluctantly agreed. As one source puts it, they literally had no other options left.
Yeah.
They were that desperate.
Okay, so they agree. How do they even build this thing?
Well, the construction itself was apparently a feat of engineering and craftsmanship. led by a guy named Epeius, noted as the greatest carpenter.
Right.
They built this immense wooden effigy from timber from Mount Ida nearby. And it was designed specifically to be large enough to hold a chosen company of elite Greek warriors.
Including Odysseus himself.
Oh, yeah. Odysseus, Menelaus, Helen's husband. Remember Diomedes, some of the best fighters? Can you just imagine the tension, the silent prayers of those guys crammed inside as this thing was being built around them?
Nail-biting stuff. And then, once the horse is actually finished, the Greek army pulls off this daring feint.
Yeah, this is brilliant. They burned their own camp, made it look like a real mess,
Right.
boarded their ships, and sailed away, ostensibly abandoning the siege, heading home. A perfect illusion of retreat.
But they left behind one crucial, terrifying piece of their deception, a single Greek man, Sinon.
Sinon, yes. His role was absolutely critical. The linchpin, really.
So what was his job?
He was tasked with convincing the Trojans that the horse was a genuine offering and that the Greeks had truly, truly departed. He had to be utterly convincing, a master of psychological manipulation. Everything hinged on Troy accepting him and his story.
Okay, so the Greeks are apparently gone. Sinon's left behind. What's the mood like inside Troy now? And how do they react when they find this enormous, mysterious horse sitting outside their gates?
Well, you can imagine, after a decade of grinding war, the Trojans were understandably overjoyed at first.
Yeah, the siege is over.
Exactly. They rushed out of their gates, finally free. But then, their joy quickly turns to suspicion when they find this colossal wooden horse just sitting there.
Oh.
Is it a trick? Is it a trap? They're priests, they're prophets, they start debating what it means. What should they do with it?
And it's right here we get one of the most famous warnings in all of history, isn't it? Tragically ignored.
Yes. Laocoön, a Trojan priest, he famously cautioned them, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Timeo denaos et dona ferentes.
He even threw his spear at it, right?
He did. Hurled his spear right at the horse's side, and it rang hollow. A critical detail they just devastatingly overlooked. Here, something wasn't right.
But they still didn't listen. Why not?
Well, then something truly dramatic happens. What the sources describe as either divine intervention or perhaps a very cunningly timed setup.
Okay.
As Laocoön is warning everyone, two monstrous sea serpents suddenly emerge from the waves.
Whoa. Sea serpents.
Yeah. They attack Laocoön and his two sons, dragging all three of them beneath the waves in this horrifying spectacle.
Oh my God.
And the Trojans, they interpret this as a clear sign of divine wrath. The gods punishing Laocoön for desecrating this sacred horse.
So that just cemented the idea that the horse was sacred.
Exactly. Their doubts just vanished, replaced by this zealous, almost terrified belief.
So with their doubts completely dispelled by this terrifying snake incident, Sinon, the master of deceit, steps in to complete his narrative. How did he seal the deal?
He played his part perfectly.
Yeah.
Presented himself as a deserter, claiming Agamemnon had tried to sacrifice him. Builds up sympathy, you know.
Right, the poor victim.
And then he spins this tale. The horse is a massive offering to the goddess Athena, designed to appease her for some Greek sacrilege during the war.
Okay, but laughable enough, maybe.
But here's the crucial lie, the one that truly swayed them. He claimed that if the horse were brought inside the city, Troy itself would become invincible, untouchable.
Oh, he played right into their deepest hopes after 10 years of war.
He played on their deepest fears and their most fervent hopes. Brilliant manipulation.
And this leads, oh, it's tragic, to their self-inflicted doom. The ultimate irony.
It is. Convinced by Sinon's lies and seeing that ominous sign of Laocoön's death, the Trojans make their final, fatal decision.
Don't do it.
They tear down a section of their own impregnable defenses, the walls they'd defended for a decade, just to allow this colossal structure to pass through.
Unbelievable.
They jubilantly dragged the wooden beast into the very heart of Troy. Songs, celebrations, unknowingly ushering in their own destruction.
The ultimate deception had succeeded. Not by force, but by a lie that Troy just swallowed whole.
Hook, line, and sinker.
So night falls. Troy is celebrating its supposed victory. The city's inhabitants, exhausted from 10 years of war, they feast, they drink.
Yeah, letting their guard down completely.
And to this false sense of security, believing the nightmare is finally over, the streets are echoing with joyous revelry, and they're completely unaware of the deadly secret hidden inside their new giant trophy.
But then in the dead of night, while the city is deep in drunken slumber, the trap springs.
Okay, here it comes.
Sinon quietly slips out, lights a signal fire, guiding the returning Greek fleet, which of course had only sailed just out of sight, waiting.
Sneaky.
And simultaneously, those concealed Greek warriors, Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes, the elite fighters. They emerged silently from the belly of the wooden horse. Can you imagine their hearts pounding in the darkness?
Terrifying.
And with terrifying precision, these Greek commandos moved through the sleeping city. They overwhelmed the unsuspecting guards,
Oh, man.
opened the mighty Sign Gate, and led in the waiting main Greek army.
So the whole army just pours in?
The whole army pours in. The 10-year siege ended not with a bang, but with a whisper, then a sudden, devastating surge of invaders into the heart of Troy.
And what followed must have been horrific.
A night of unimaginable slaughter. The Trojans, roused from their sleep, find their city invaded, their homes ablaze. No quarter was given.
Ariel.
Kings, queens, warriors, innocents, all fell. The once impregnable Troy, this symbol of resilience that had withstood a decade of direct assault, it burned to the ground. Its fall was complete and entirely engineered by the very cunning that allowed that wooden horse to pass its walls.
The sheer audacity of this plan makes it feel almost larger than life, doesn't it? So what sources do we actually have that tell us this incredible story, and how much of it is, myth versus potential historical fact?
Well, you're not wrong about it feeling like a story. I mean, the main source most people think of for the Trojan War is Homer's Iliad.
Right.
Which was probably written down sometime in the 8th century BCE. But interestingly, it actually only recounts about 52 days during the final year of that 10-year conflict.
Only 52 days. So where does the rest come from? The horse isn't even in the Iliad, is it?
No, it's not. It comes from other sources. There was a long oral tradition before Homer and other poems, now mostly lost, unfortunately, called the epic cycle. These filled in the gaps, telling the beginning and the end of the war, including the story of the horse.
Ah, okay.
And the Greeks themselves, they imagined this war happening way back around the 13th century BCE in the late Bronze Age.
And the origins of the conflict itself are pretty, well, epic, as you'd expect.
Oh, yeah. In the grand mythological tradition, it supposedly started because Zeus wanted to reduce humanity's ever-increasing population.
Yeah?
Bit drastic.
Yeah, just a bit. But the more practical reason...
The more practical reason given is the expedition to reclaim Helen, the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta.
Right, Helen of Troy.
Exactly. She was abducted, or maybe went willingly, is debated by the Trojan prince Paris. He got her as his prize from the goddess Aphrodite for judging her the most beautiful in a divine beauty contest.
Ah, the judgment of Paris. That kicked it all off.
Pretty much. Menelaus and his brother Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, were furious. They rallied the Greek kingdoms to get Helen back and, punish Trojan impudence. It's fascinating how a seemingly personal dispute could spark such a massive, decade-long war.
It really is. And the key players involved are just legendary figures.
Absolutely. On the Greek side, you've got King Agamemnon leading this huge coalition. Heroes like the almost invincible Achilles, the super cunning Odysseus, who we've talked about, and the powerful Ajax.
And on the Trojan side,
you have King Priam, elderly but respected, leading his army. And his great heroes like his son Hector, the noble warrior, and Aeneas, who later, according to Virgil, escapes and founds Rome.
And the gods. You can't forget the gods meddling in all this.
Definitely not. What's particularly striking in the myths is how actively involved the Olympian gods were. Some sided with the Greeks like Athena, Poseidon, Hera. Others backed the Trojans like Apollo, Aphrodite, Ares.
They weren't just watching from the sidelines then.
Not at all. They often intervened directly, protecting their favorites, healing wounds, even fighting themselves sometimes. Or just generally stirring the pot and spurring on the conflict. It makes the whole thing feel even grander, more fated.
So the war wasn't just this long, boring siege followed by the horse. It was a decade punctuated by incredible battles and events, right? What were some of the other really significant moments that highlight just how fierce and prolonged this conflict was?
Oh, absolutely. There were countless individual duels, epic one-on-ones, like Paris versus Menelaus. Early on, Menelaus nearly killed him, but Aphrodite whisked Paris away.
Right.
Hector versus Ajax. They fought each other to a standstill, basically a draw, as night fell. And they even exchanged gifts out of respect afterwards.
Wow, a different kind of warfare sometimes?
In moments, yeah. But mostly brutal. The Greek ships down by the beach were repeatedly attacked. Hector even managed to set one ablaze at one point, a really desperate moment for the Greeks.
And the whole Achilles saga is central, isn't it?
Hugely central. A crucial turning point was the death of Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion.
He was wearing Achilles' armor, right?
Exactly, trying to rally the Greeks. When Hector killed him, it brought Achilles back into the fight with a vengeance. He'd been sulking in his tent after a massive argument with Agamemnon over a war prize.
Ah, yes, the rage of Achilles, that really changed
It
things.
absolutely galvanized the Greeks and shifted the tide dramatically against the Trojans.
I remember that part vividly from the Iliad. Achilles gets this new, magnificent armor forged by the god Hephaestus.
Yeah, divine bling.
And just routs the Trojans. He famously kills Hector in this epic duel outside the walls. And then the really shocking part, dishonorably drags Hector's body behind his chariot around the city.
A truly brutal act, even by ancient standards, shows the depth of his grief and rage.
The Iliad actually ends shortly after that with Hector's funeral. But the other sources, the epic cycle stuff, tell us what happened next leading up to the horse.
Right. These other sources tell us about Achilles' own death shot in his vulnerable heel by Paris, an arrow apparently guided by Apollo.
The famous Achilles heel.
That's the one. Then there's Ajax's madness and tragic suicide after he loses the contest for Achilles' armor to Odysseus. Paris himself dies, and Odysseus pulls off another sneaky move, stealing the Palladion, a sacred statue of Athena from inside Troy, which was said to protect the city. All these events weaken Troy and set the stage for the final, desperate gamble of the horse.
But even with the victory finally won, thanks to the horse, the Greeks didn't just sail home happily ever after, did they?
No, not at all. They paid a heavy price for their victory. According to the myths, because of their pitiless ravaging of the city, looting temples, killing non-combatants, sacrilegious acts like the rape of the prophetess Cassandra right in Athena's temple.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. The gods were furious. They punished the Greeks by sending storms to wreck their ships on the way home. This led to protracted, incredibly difficult voyages back for many of the survivors. Odysseus' 10-year journey home in the Odyssey is the most famous example.
So much suffering. Even for the supposed victors, the cost of their triumph was just immense.
Truly immense. Victory, but at a terrible cost.
This brings up that really important question again. How much of this is actually myth, and how much might be history? Is there any tangible archaeological evidence that such a city, such a war, could have existed?
It's been, as you can imagine, the subject of intense scholarly debate for centuries. But it's now almost universally accepted that the archaeological site in modern-day Turkey at Hisarlik in Anatolia, that this site, which revealed a city prospering over thousands of years, is indeed Homer's Troy.
Really? So Troy was a real place?
Yes. Specifically, the layer known as Troy VI, which dates from around 1750 to 1300 BCE, right in that late Bronze Age period the Greeks talked about, is considered the most likely candidate for the city Homer described.
Wow. And does it match the descriptions?
It does, remarkably well in some ways. It has these impressive sloping fortifications, very strong walls, fitting those Homeric descriptions of strong-built Troy or windy Troy because it's on a hill.
That's incredible. So the myth really does seem to have roots in a real place. What's the most intriguing detail, maybe, that archaeologists have uncovered that might support or echo the Homeric descriptions of the war itself? Is there evidence of a siege?
Well, this is where it gets really fascinating. Archaeologists have found evidence of destruction in layers corresponding roughly to the time period, specifically in Troy the Aetia, which followed Troy VI around 1300-1250 BCE. And importantly, they found things like bronze arrowheads, spear tips, even slingshots, dating to around 1250 BCE, actually embedded in the fortification walls.
Embedded in the walls, like from an attack.
Exactly. This correlates quite closely with the traditional ancient dates for the war. It strongly suggests probable conflicts, maybe sieges, between the Mycenaean Greeks and the Hittite-affiliated civilization at Troy.
So maybe not a 10-year war exactly like Homer described with gods fighting.
Perhaps not on that epic divine scale. But it strongly suggests that conflict, sieges, and powerful fortified cities were definitely a reality in that period. The story, it seems, has a very real kernel of historical truth at its core.
So, wrapping this up, the legend of the Trojan Horse. It remains one of the most compelling, iconic tales of ancient warfare, doesn't it? A true masterclass in deception, in psychological manipulation.
Absolutely. It stands as the ultimate testament to strategic cunning, really.
Mm-hmm.
Proof that intellect, that cleverness can sometimes triumph over sheer brute force.
It's also a chilling story, though, about the dangers of misplaced trust, the consequences of misinterpreting signs, poor Laocoön, and just the devastating power of a brilliantly executed lie.
Definitely. Troy's doom, at the end of the day, was sealed by its own hands, by the very act of welcoming the enemy inside its supposedly impregnable walls.
That timeless relevance is palpable, I think, because it's fundamentally about human psychology, isn't it? Vulnerability, hope, fear, belief.
Exactly. It speaks to something deep in our nature.
Absolutely. It's this powerful narrative that reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those we unwittingly invite inside our own walls, believing them to be gifts or solutions. So, for you listening right now, maybe consider this. How do the lessons of the Trojan horse manifest in today's world? Where might we, maybe metaphorically speaking, be unwittingly inviting enemies or, detrimental influences inside our own walls, believing them to be appealing offers or easy solutions that might, in fact, conceal hidden dangers?
That's a great question to ponder.
What's your truth?